person who is completely educated according to the principles of Vedic knowledge deserves to be commander-in-chief, ruler of the state, the first to chastise, and the proprietor of the whole planet. Prita Maharaj offered everything to the Kumaras. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, it is very clearly stated that a kingdom, state, or empire must be governed under the instructions of saintly persons and brahmanas like the Kumaras. When monarchy ruled throughout the world, the monarch was actually directed by a board of brahmanas and saintly persons. The king, as the administrator of the state, executed his duties as a servant of the brahmanas. It was not that the kings or the brahmanas were dictators. 1 second. The king, as the administrator of the state, executed his duties as a servant of the Brahmanas. It was not that the kings or Brahmanas were dictators, nor did they consider themselves proprietors of the state. The kings were also well versed in Vedic literatures and thus were familiar with the injunction of Shri Ishopanishad, Ishavaisham Idam Sarvam. Everything that exists belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna also claims that he is the proprietor of all planetary systems. Sarvaloka Maheshwara. Since this is the case, no one can claim to be proprietor of the state. The king, president, or head of the state should always remember that he is not the proprietor, but the servant. In the present age, the king or president forgets that he is the servant of God and thinks himself as servant of the people. The present democratic government is proclaimed to be a people's government, a government by the people and for the people. But this type of government is not sanctioned by the Vedas. The Vedas maintain that a kingdom should be governed for the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead and should therefore be ruled by a representative of the Lord. The head of a state should not be appointed if he is bereft of all Vedic knowledge. In this verse, it is clearly stated, Veda Shastra Vid Arhati, that all high government posts are especially meant for persons who are well conversant with the teachings of the Vedas. In the Vedas, there are definite instructions defining how a king, commander-in-chief, soldier, and citizen should behave. Unfortunately, there are many so-called philosophers in the present age who give instruction without citing authority, and many leaders follow their unauthorized instructions. Consequently, people are not happy. The modern theory of dialectical communism, set forth by Karl Marx and followed by communist governments, is not perfect. According to Vedic communism, no one in the state should ever starve. According to Vedic communism, no one in the state should ever starve. Presently, there are many bogus institutions which are collecting funds from the public for the purpose of giving food to starving people. But these funds are invariably misused. According to the Vedic instructions, the government should arrange things in such a way that there will be no question of starvation. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that a householder must see to it that even a lizard or a snake does not starve. They also must be given food. In actuality, however, there is no question of starvation because everything is the property of the Supreme Lord, and he sees to it that there is ample arrangement for feeding everyone. In the Vedas, Kathopanishad 2.2.13, it is said, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidati Kaman. The Supreme Lord supplies the necessities of life to everyone, and there is no question of starvation. If anyone starves, it is due to the mismanagement of the so-called ruler, governor, or president. It is clear, therefore, that a person who is not well versed in the Vedic injunctions, Veda Shastra Vit, should not run for election as president, governor, etc. Formerly, kings were rajarsis, which meant that although they were serving as kings, they were as good as saintly persons because they would not transgress any of the injunctions of the Vedic scriptures and would rule under the direction of great saintly persons and Brahmins. According to this arrangement, modern presidents, governors, and chief executive officers are all unworthy of their posts because they are not conversant with the Vedic administrative knowledge, and they do not take direction from great saintly persons and Brahmins. Because of this disobedience to the orders of the Vedas and the Brahmanas, King Vena, Pritha Maharaj's father, was killed by the Brahmanas. Pritha Maharaja therefore knew very well that it behooves him to rule the planet as the servant of saintly persons and Brahmanas. Well, they actually killed King Vena because he was nonsense. That happens also even today, where unworthy rulers of a country can be assassinated or killed. Text 46. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras eat their food by virtue of the Brahmanas' mercy. It is the Brahmanas who enjoy their own property, clothe themselves with their own property, and give charity with their own property. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of God is worshipped with the words Namah Brahmanya Devaya, which indicate that the Supreme Lord accepts the Brahmanas as worshipable gods. The Supreme Lord is worshipped by everyone, yet to teach others, he worships the Brahmanas. Everyone should follow the instructions of the Brahmanas, for their only business is to spread Sabda Brahma, or Vedic knowledge, all over the world. Whenever there is a scarcity of Brahmanas to spread Vedic knowledge, chaos throughout the human society results. Since Brahmanas and Vaishnavas are direct servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they do not depend on others. In actuality, everything in the world belongs to the Brahmanas, and out of their humility, the Brahmanas accept charity from the Kshatriyas or kings and the Vaishyas or merchants. Everything belongs to the Brahmanas, but the Kshatriya government and the mercantile people keep everything in custody, like bankers. And whenever the Brahmanas need money, the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas should supply it. It is like a savings account with money, which the depositor can draw out at his will. The Brahmanas being engaged in the service of the Lord have very little time to handle the finances of the world, and therefore the riches are kept by the Kshatriyas or the kings, who are to produce money upon the Brahmanas' demand. Actually, the Brahmanas or Vaishnavas do not live at others' cost. They live by spending their own money, although it appears that they are collecting this money from others. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas have no right to give charity, for whatever they possess belongs to the Brahmins. Therefore, charity should be given by the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas under the instructions of the Brahmanas. Unfortunately, at the present moment, there is a scarcity of Brahmanas, and since the so-called Kshatriyas and Vaishyas do not carry out the orders of the Brahmanas, the world is in a chaotic condition. The second line of this verse indicates that the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras eat only by virtue of the Brahmanas' mercy. In other words, they should not eat anything which is forbidden by the Brahmanas. The Brahmanas and Vaishnavas know what to eat, and by their personal example, they do not eat anything which is not offered first to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They eat only prasada, or remnants of food offered to the Lord. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras should eat only Krishna prasada, which is offered them by the mercy of the Brahmins. They cannot open slaughterhouses and eat meat, fish, or eggs, or drink liquor, or earn money for this purpose without authorization. In the present age, because society is not guided by grammatical instruction, the whole population is only absorbed in sinful activities. Consequently, everyone is deservedly being punished by the laws of nature. This is the situation in this age of Kali, or Kali Yuga. Text number 47. Prita Maharaj continued, how can such persons who have rendered unlimited service by explaining the path of self-realization in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and whose explanations are given for our enlightenment with complete conviction and Vedic evidence, be repaid except by folded palms containing water for their satisfaction? This is a question. Such great personalities can be satisfied only by their own activities, which are distributed amongst human society out of their unlimited mercy. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In other words, basically it says it's not possible to pay back the Brahmanas because of their unlimited mercy. They're not greedy people. They're always helping others make spiritual advancement. So it's very difficult to repay them. That's why it says such great personalities can be satisfied only by their own activities, which are distributed amongst human society out of their unlimited mercy. Yeah, when you meet a genuine devotee, the genuine devotee is a minimalist. He lives only for the bare necessities of life, but he'll do everything to educate the people to do the right things in life. It's difficult to reimburse a person who does that because they are not selfish and they are not greedy and they are only working for the welfare of society, welfare of the people. So a person like that should be given all respect, and one should hear the advice of such persons. Okay, so text 47. Peter Maharaj continues. How can such persons who have rendered unlimited service by explaining the path of self-realization in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and whose explanations are given for our enlightenment with complete conviction and Vedic evidence, be repaid except by folded palms containing water for their satisfaction? Such great personalities can be satisfied only by their own activities, which are distributed amongst human society out of their unlimited mercy. In other words, when there's a genuine, let's say, Brahmana or a genuine pure devotee, like Prabhupada, you can't really pay him back for what he's done. Therefore, we have to offer our humble obeisances to such a pure devotee and follow his instructions for the benefit of society. Great personalities in the material world are very eager to render welfare service to human society. But actually, no one can render better service than one who distributes the knowledge of spiritual realization in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All living entities are within the clutches of the illusory energy. Forgetting their real identity, they hover in material existence. In other words, they're hanging out in material existence, transmigrating from one body to another in search of a peaceful life. Since these living entities have very little knowledge of self-realization, they are not getting any relief, although they are very anxious to attain peace of mind and some substantial happiness. Saintly persons like the Kumaras, Narada, Prahlada, Janaka, Sukadeva Goswami, and Kapila Deva, as well as the followers of such authorities as the Vaishnava Acharyas and their servants, can render a viable service to humanity by disseminating the knowledge of the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. Such knowledge is the perfect benediction for humanity. Perfect benediction, meaning the perfect blessing for humanity. Knowledge of Krishna is such a great gift that it is impossible to repay the benefactor. Therefore, Prita Maharaja requested Kumaras to be satisfied by their own benevolent means very merciful, unselfish service, by their own benevolent activities in delivering souls from the clutches of Maya. The king saw that there was no other way to satisfy them for their exalted activities. The word Vinoda Patram can be divided into two words, Vina and Uda Patram, or can be understood as one word, Vinoda Patram, which means joker. A joker's activities simply arouse laughter, and a person who tries to repay the spiritual master or teacher of the transcendental message of Krishna becomes a laughing stock, just like a joker, because it is not possible to repay such a debt. the best friend and benefactor of all people is one who awakens humanity to its original Krishna consciousness. Okay. In other words, it's a big joke to think that you can repay the spiritual master or teacher of the transcendental message of Krishna. The pure devotee is the best friend and benefactor of all people and is one who awakens humanity to its original Krishna consciousness. So such a person cannot be repaid like someone that does something for you, you can repay that person, but it's not possible to repay such a pure devotee who, as the best friend and benefactor of all people, is one who awakens humanity to its original Krishna consciousness. Wow. That's exactly what Prabhupada did. He awakened humanity to its original Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Krishna consciousness has been, from the beginning of time, the real culture and the real, let's say, process by which people can make spiritual advancement. Unfortunately, in present time, that type of pure devotee who instructs people to follow the regulative principles of spiritual life are very scarce, and very few people are like that. They try their best to spread Krishna consciousness, like Prabhupada has done, but not everybody is interested. But actually, the best friend and benefactor of all people is one who awakens humanity to us. So that's what Prabhupada did. He's still doing it by his potency through the books that he has written and the examples that he has given of his complete dedication to Krishna. Text 48. The great sage Maitreya continued, being thus worshipped by Maharaj Prithu. The four Kumaras, who were masters of devotional service, became very pleased. Indeed, they appeared in the sky and praised the character of the king, and everyone observed them. So we can understand from this verse that the four Kumaras were able to fly through the sky without an airplane. That's how powerful they were. It is said that the demigods never touch the surface of the earth. They walk and travel in space only. Like the great sage Narada, the Kumaras do not require any machine to travel in space. There are also residents of Siddhaloka who can travel in space without machines. Since they can go from one planet to another, they are called Siddhas. That is to say, they have acquired all mystic and yogic powers. Such great saintly persons who have attained complete perfection in mystic yoga are not visible in this age on earth because humanity is not worthy of their presence. Well, that's a big statement by Prabhupada. Because humanity is not worthy of their presence, that means that so many people are engaged in sinful activity that they don't deserve to see such pure devotees like the Kumaras. The Kumaras, however, praise the characteristics of Maharaj Prithu and his great devotional attitude and humility. The Kumaras were greatly satisfied by King Prithu's method of worship. It was by the grace of Maharaj Prithu that the common citizens in his domain could see the Kumaras flying in outer space. Well, when you have a genuinely pure devotee as the leader of the society, then people become so, let's say, pure in their practice of Krishna consciousness that they can actually see great transcendental devotees flying in outer space. Text 49. And they don't need airplanes, let's put it like that. They can fly in outer space in their own will, at their own will, without the help of airplanes and so-called, super. They have supernatural powers. Let's put it like that. Text 49. Amongst grateful personalities, Maharaj Prithu was the chief by virtue of his fixed position in relation to spiritual enlightenment. He remained satisfied as one who has achieved all success in spiritual understanding. Well, that's real success. When you have spiritual understanding, spiritual education, and spiritual enlightenment, then you are in a position to help human society make spiritual progress. That's a real leader, not you simply help the bodies of people to make more money and have more sense gratification. That's not the purpose of a genuine brahmana. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Remaining fixed in devotional service gives one the utmost in self-satisfaction. Yeah, a devotee who is always engaged in devotional service, strictly follows the regulative principles, always chants Hare Krishna, etc., is self-satisfied. They don't need anything else. They have everything they need by engaging in devotional service. So remaining fixed in devotional service gives one the utmost in self-satisfaction. Actually, self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So self-satisfaction, what does it mean? It means that you're so happy that you're not attracted by any materialistic pleasures or materialistic enticements. You're completely satisfied by performing devotional service. You don't need anything else. Actually, self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is nothing to desire, he is fully satisfied with himself. Similarly, a devotee who has no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as self-satisfied as the Supreme Lord. Self-satisfied means you don't need any extraneous power or, let's say, pleasure, etc. You're satisfied by devotional service and nothing else. So, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to desire, he is fully satisfied with himself. Similarly, a devotee who has no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as self-satisfied as the Supreme Lord. Yeah, Krishna has no desire to engage in any low-class sense gratification. He's self-satisfied by his own spiritual potency. Similarly, a devotee who has no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as self-satisfied as the Supreme Lord. Everyone is hankering after peace of mind and self-satisfaction, but these can only be achieved by becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. So many people are saying Shanti, 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 Shanti. We want peace, we want peace, we want peace. But there's no peace, there's no peace, there's no peace because people are engaged in sinful activities. Just look at how many people eat meat, how many animals are killed every year to satisfy the lusty taste buds of nonsense people. The numbers are gigantic of the number of animals that are killed to satisfy the so-called leaders of society and their followers. So even well, let's see. Let's look at like a person who is a genuine Brahmana, and that's Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi is a vegetarian. He doesn't drink liquor. He doesn't eat meat. He doesn't engage in illicit sex. He's a devotee. He respects brahmanas and so forth. Okay, he is a politician, but he's not. But he's not a greedy person. He lives very simply, and he is a servant of brahmanas. He respects the brahmanas.
And
Yeah, he's an
protects
ideal person. Yeah,
cows also.
yeah. Also, he protects cows. He loves cows.
Mhm.
He has his Ponguru cows in his house. They
Yes.
walk around
Yes, Maharaj.
in his house. Right, he's living with the cows. He's an ideal person. Yeah, but there's a lot of problems now, though.
Yes, Maharaj. The war started
The war has started, right?
yesterday.
Yeah,
Yesterday afternoon for us. It's like 2:30 India time night. 2:30.
it's horrible.
But they're not attacking to the civilians as well as the military people or anybody. Only they're attacking on terrorism, on terrorists, on the places in Pakistan, wherever.
You mean Modi?
Yeah. All 9 places are attacked in Pakistan. All are terrorists.
How the terrorists always like in India? They're
It's in Pakistan, Maharaj.
the terrorists are usually Muslims. I mean, there are non-Muslims also. There are dacoits and murderers and whatever, but usually they're Muslims in India who are completely dedicated to engage in sinful activities. Yeah, they love to eat meat. Oh my God. They can't live without eating meat. It's terrible. Well, and Americans also. Americans are big meat eaters. So they're not any better. Okay, so this is text 49. Amongst the great personalities, Maharaj Pritha was the chief by virtue of his fixed position in relation to spiritual enlightenment. In other words, his number one preoccupation was spiritual enlightenment, not only for himself, but also for society. He remained satisfied as one who has achieved all success in spiritual understanding. Remaining fixed in devotional service gives one the utmost in self-satisfaction. Actually, self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, if we can look at Gandhi, Gandhi was not satisfied. His whole, what you would call non-violence philosophy failed horribly and caused the death of many hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of people. And he was very frustrated. And he was killed by his own people, by an Hindu that, wanted to stop him from continuing to make a mess of the country. So that's the example of a person who claims to be a Brahmana, but is not qualified to be a Brahmana. What happens? He'll be killed by someone so that he stops making such a mess of the country. So, remaining fixed in devotional service gives one the utmost in self-satisfaction. Actually, self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of God. Okay, so those two sentences are the perfect statement of who a devotee should be. One, the devotee should remain always fixed in devotional service. That's the only way that they will have self-satisfaction in life. And the self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's just in two sentences, the perfection of devotee life is explained. Actually, self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to desire, he is fully satisfied with himself. Similarly, a devotee who has no desire other than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as self-satisfied as the Supreme Lord. Everyone is hankering after peace of mind and self-satisfaction, but these can only be achieved by becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. King Prithu's statements in previous verses regarding his vast knowledge and perfect devotional service are justified here, for he is considered best amongst all Mahatmas. In Bhagavad Gita 9.13, Shri Krishna speaks of Mahatmas in this way. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivin bhaktitam asritaha bhajanti ananya manaso gyatva bhutadam avyayam. O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. Well, God, Krishna is eternal, and he's the oldest person, and he knows everything that is beneficial for society. The Mahatmas are not under the clutches of the illusory energy, but are under the protection of the spiritual energy. Because of this, the real Mahatma is always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Prithu Maharaja exhibited all exhibited all the symptoms of a Mahatma. Therefore, he is mentioned in this verse as Duryo Mahatam, best of the Mahatmas. Well, Srila Prabhupada was also Duryo Mahatam, the best of the Mahatmas. So, Prabhupada was not killed, but Mahatma Gandhi was killed because he was not a genuine Mahatma. He dressed like one. He sometimes talked like one, but he was not a genuine Mahatma. Therefore, he was assassinated because he was making a mess of society. And his own people assassinated him, not the Muslims, not the Christians or the British. The British liked him because they could manipulate him. So they're not worried about Mahatma Gandhi. But
Maharaj,
what's that?
Maharaj, who do you think is the greatest leader in freedom fighter in India, like in 1945 during that time? So you said Mahatma is not a good leader. So what do you think who is the good leader?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Yeah.
So basically, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. So basically, Indians were ruled by Britishers because we have started the history books, what were taught. And also, my grandfather, I've learned a lot from him, who's not there now. So he at that time chose the non-violent method to free India. However, at the time when the partition happened, he was he collected all the people together. Of course, there was some violent method also used by Subhash Chandra Bose, and there were like timelines. But at that time, he rallied everybody together in the independence movement. After the independence, he fell prey to Jinnah, as we all know, and he made wrong decisions. At that point, most of the Indians at that time, they used to turn off his radio. They used to say some old person is speaking. So definitely he made mistakes. But just like Nelson Mandela, who stayed in the jail and tried to rally behind Africans, similarly, during 1920 and 1920 to 1947, Mahatma Gandhi has done that kind of work. Of course, he made wrong and poor choices. So, Mataji, we are not contending here about who is the greater leader of India. But what Guru Maharaj is saying, what Srila Prabhupada in the 2-3 lectures before, what Srila Prabhupada has written to Mahatma Gandhi, he had the potential to convert all those Indians who were following him into Krishna consciousness, and he could choose other methods, but he did not choose, and he fell prey to the politics, and he never understood um, Bhagavad Gita or Krishna consciousness. Sorry, Guru Maharaj, I just wanted to clarify because it's not a question. We are not debating here who did that non-violent movement and who did what, but we are asking here. We are talking from the Krishna conscious perspective. Sorry, Guru Maharaj, I interrupted.
Mhm.
You're excused. It is not possible to win any war by being a non-violent person. Violence is necessary in certain circumstances. So, a person who claims to be a pacifist is not going to be a good leader of society, because when there is a need for violence, he will not be able to function properly because he does not believe in violence. Violence is necessary in certain circumstances. Just like if someone, let's say there's a dacoit that enters into your house and he begins to choke your wife, and the husband, and you as the husband you don't do anything because you're a pacifist and you don't want to hurt anyone. Does that make sense? You're going to let that person choke your wife to death? And by saying, well, I'm a pacifist, I can't do anything. That's crazy. This whole idea that Gandhi had of, nonviolence, that is not a good philosophy for managing a country. And because of that, he was assassinated. People realized that, his philosophy was nonsense, or at least some people realized that. That's why he was assassinated, because he was leading the country in the wrong direction.
Hare Krishna
Okay.
Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to add 2 points here. We have great 2 epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana. And in both the great epics we have, there is no non-violence. It's always violence. Like Rama killed with fight, as well as Pandavas did the same thing. So there is no example as such in our history that we should learn or take a something example for us in our life, that with the non-violence somebody has done something.
That's a very good statement.
Yeah.
Very good, very correct statement. But yet Gandhi, he comes up with this non-violent movement. And what happened? He caused the death of 1 million people at least by his non-violence. Okay, so Mahatma Nastamam Partha David Papitim Asrita Vajanti Ananya Manaso Gyatva Bhutadim Agayam. O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So, can we say that Gandhi was a genuine devotee? No. He didn't follow Vedic traditions. He was not, let's say, a devotee in the full sense of the word. He was, the British characterized him perfectly. Amongst devotees, he's a politician. Amongst politicians, he's a devotee. So that was the way the British characterized Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so the Mahatmas are not under the clutches of the illusory energy, but are under the protection of the supreme energy. Because of this, the real Mahatma is always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Prithu Maharaja exhibited all the symptoms of a Mahatma. Therefore, he is mentioned in this verse as Durya Mahatam, best of the Mahatmas. Okay, so there is this Mahatma Gandhi, but he's not the best of the Mahatmas. In fact, they should never even give him that name, that respect. He was not really a good leader. He caused the death of many people. Therefore, but yet he is put up like the epitome of the perfect leader today, and he's worshipped by Hindus as a great leader. But actually, he was assassinated by a Hindu. So why did he get assassinated by a Hindu? Because he was not making the right decisions. He was a coward. That's the problem. You can't be a coward when you're supposed to be the leader of a society. At some point or other, you have to be able to fight and protect the people. You can't protect the people by being a pacifist. So there are Brahmanas and there are Kshatriyas. So Mahatma Gandhi was not a Kshatriya, but to be a leader of a country, you have to be a Kshatriya. You have to be able to control the dacoits and the thieves and murderers in the society. You can't do that by being a pacifist. So that was Gandhi's problem. He was a pacifist. He believed in no violence, but therefore he was not qualified to be the leader of society. Okay, so being self-satisfied, Maharaj Prithu executed his duties as perfectly as possible, according to time and his situation, strength, and financial position. His only aim in all his activities was to satisfy the absolute truth. I mean, that means Krishna. In this way, he duly acted. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Prithu was a responsible monarch. In other words, he was a responsible leader of society. He had to execute the duties of a Kshatriya, a king, and a devotee at the same time. That's a real leader of society or monarch. He executes the duties of a Kshatriya, a king, and a devotee at the same time. Being perfect in the Lord's devotional service, he could execute his prescribed duties with complete perfection, as befitted the time and circumstances, and his financial strength and personal ability. In this regard, the word karmani in this verse is significant. Prithu Maharaj's activities were not ordinary, for they were in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Rupa Goswami has advised that things which are favorable to devotional service should not be rejected, nor should activity favorable for devotional service be considered ordinary work or fruitive activity. For example, an ordinary worker conducts business in order to earn money for his sense gratification. A devotee may perform the same work in exactly the same way, but his aim is to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Consequently, his activities are not ordinary. Prithu Maharaj's activities were therefore not ordinary, but were all spiritual and transcendental. For his aim was to satisfy the Lord, just as Arjuna, who was a warrior, had to fight to satisfy Krishna. There's an example, right? Arjuna didn't want to fight. Krishna forced him to fight. So that means that there are situations where there's justification to fight and kill people who are breaking the principles of Krishna consciousness. Prithu Maharaja performed his royal duties as king for the satisfaction of Krishna. Indeed, whatever he did as an emperor of the whole world was perfectly befitting a pure devotee. It is therefore said by a Vaishnava poet, Vaishnavera Priya Mudra Vidne Na Ujhaya. No one can understand the activities of a pure devotee. A pure devotee's activities may appear like ordinary activities, but behind them there is profound significance, the satisfaction of the Lord. In other words, whatever a pure devotee does, it's for the satisfaction of the Lord. It's not for the satisfaction of this or that. It's for the satisfaction of the Lord. In order to understand the activities of a Vaishnava, one has to become very expert. Maharaj Prithu did not allow himself to function outside the institution of 4 varnas and 4 ashramas. Although, as a Vaishnava, he was a Paramahansa, transcendental to all material activities, He remained at his position as a Kshatriya to rule the world and at the same time remained transcendental to such activities by satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, concealing himself as a pure devotee. He externally manifested himself as a very powerful and dutiful king. In other words, none of his activities were carried out for his own sense gratification. Everything he did was meant for the satisfaction of the senses of the Lord. This is clearly explained in the next verse. Okay, the next verse, and then we'll end. Maharaj Prithu completely dedicated himself to be an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to material nature. Consequently, all the fruits of his activities were dedicated to the Lord, and he always thought of himself as the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of everything. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Second. The life and dedication of Maharaja Prithu in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead serve as a good example of Karma Yoga. The term Karma Yoga is often used in Bhagavad Gita, and herein Maharaj Prithu is giving a practical example of what Karma Yoga actually is. The first requirement for the proper execution of Karma Yoga is given herein. Phalam Brahmani Sannyasa or Vinyasa. One must give the fruit of his activities to the Supreme Brahman, Parabrahman, or Krishna. By doing so, one actually situates himself in the renounced order of life or sannyasa. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 18.2, giving up the fruits of one's activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called sannyasa. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam, sannyasam kavayo vidu, sarva karma phala tyagam, prahus tyagam vichakshana. To give up the results of all activities is called renunciation or tyaga by the wise, and that state is called the renounced order of life or sannyasa by great learned men. Although he was living as a householder, Prithu Maharaj was actually in the renounced order of life or sannyasa. This will be clearer in the following verses. The word nirvisanga, uncontaminated, is very significant because Maharaj Prithu was not attached to the results of his activities. In this material world, a person is always thinking of the proprietorship of everything he accumulates or works for. When the fruits of one's activities are rendered to the service of the Lord, one is actually practicing Karma Yoga. Anyone can practice Karma Yoga, but it is especially easy for the householder who can install the deity of the Lord in the home and worship him according to the methods of Bhakti Yoga. This method includes 9 items: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping the deity, praying, carrying out orders, serving Krishna as friend, and sacrificing everything for him. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Satyam, Atmanivedanam. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.23. These methods of Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are being broadcast all over the world by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Anyone can learn these methods simply by following the examples of the members of the society. In one's home or in a temple, the deity is considered the proprietor of everything, and everyone is considered the deity's servant. The Lord is transcendental, for he is not part of this material creation. The words Prakrite Param are used in this verse because everything within this material world is created by the external material energy of the Lord, but the Lord himself is not a creation of this material energy. The Lord is the supreme superintendent of all material creations, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.10. Mayadakshena prakriti suyute sacharan nitananena konteya jagat viparivartate. The material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all the moving and unmoving beings. And by its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. All material changes and material progress taking place by the wonderful interaction of matter are under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Events in the material world are not taking place blindly. If one always remains a servant of Krishna and engages everything in his service, one is accepted as Jivan Mukta, a liberated soul, even during his lifetime within the material world. Generally, liberation takes place after one gives up this body. But one who lives according to the example of Pritha Maharaja is liberated even in this lifetime. In Krishna consciousness, the results of one's activities depend on the will of the Supreme Person. Indeed, in all cases, the result is not dependent on one's own personal dexterity, meaning expertise, but it's completely dependent on the will of the Supreme. This is the real significance of Phalam Brahmani Sannyasa. A soul dedicated to the service of the Lord should never think of himself as the personal proprietor or the superintendent. A dedicated devotee should prosecute his work according to the rules and regulations described in devotional service. The results of his activities are completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. Well, this was manifested by the Brahma, by the relative of Krishna. Who was that? When Krishna had to go away and live incognito for 1 year, and before that he was ostracized from Vedic society, and then for 1 year also he had to live incognito. So then who was that? The sincere follower of Krishna.
Pandavas, Maharaj.
Huh?
Pandavas?
Yeah.
Yes, Pandavas lived in incognito. That's right.
Yeah, but during that time, who was managing the
Vidura.
Vidura? Okay.
Vidura. Yeah.
Anyway, he had to manage the society, but he did it by putting the chapels of the Lord on the Vyasasan, and every day he would pay, he'd give his obeisances to the chapels of the Lord, and he would manage without thinking himself to be the owner or the leader. Now that's a real devotee. And
Yeah, that was Bharat Maharaj for Lord Ram. He kept the Charan Padukas.
yes, and when the period of time for his exile was over, when he came back, immediately his brother gave back the whole kingdom to Lord Rama. See, now that when you read these transcendental pastimes of the Lord and his devotees, you begin to understand the exalted position of devotees. They're not greedy. They're not jealous. They're not aggrandizers, meaning they want to get as much as they can for themselves. They are controlled by Dharma, following the righteous path all the time. So, when who had to go into incognito for 1 year?
Pandavas for Guru Maharaj, Pandavas went in incognito for 1 year.
Yeah. So and they, but who took care of the society when they did that?
So Duryodhana got the whole kingdom at that time. So they were given, and Dhritarashtra was ruling the whole kingdom of Indraprastha and Hastinapur.
Yeah, but someone was maintaining the rightful, let's say, Pandavas, let's say, assets. Who was that? What was his name?
Bhishma Pitama or Vidura, you're saying, but it was basically managed by. It went into Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra controlled the whole country at that time, and that's where the battle of Mahabharat took place when they came back.
Okay. Who actually put the chapels of
Bharat Maharaj.
Bharat Maharaj? Yes.
Bharat. Yeah, Lord Rama's Bharat.
Treta Yuga Maharaj.
Yeah. So Bharat Maharaj is the example of a genuine devotee. He never considered himself the ruler of the country in the absence of his brother, right?
Yes, ma'am.
He always considered that his brother was the ruler, but because he had to go into for 14 years and away from the position of king, and 1 year in incognito, Bharat managed everything as the servant of his brother. He never imagined himself to be the ruler. So when you think of Bharat, you have to think of the most loyal and surrendered person who has no selfishness and no envy. So he's the person that we should emulate, or we should follow his example of pure devotion. Okay. All right, I think we'll stop there. And our takeaway today is, in one's home or temple, the deity is considered the proprietor of everything. And everyone is considered the deity's eternal servant. The Lord is transcendental, for he is not part of this material creation. The words Prakrite Param are used in this verse because everything within this material world is created by the external material energy of the Lord, but the Lord himself is not a creation of this material energy. The Lord is the superintendent of all material creations, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:10, Maya Dakshina Prakriti, Suyate Satcharachanam, Etananena Kontia, Jagat Viparivartate. The material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all the moving and unmoving beings, and by its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. All material changes and material progress taking place by the wonderful interaction of matter are under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Events in the material world are not taking place blindly. If one always remains a servant of Krishna and engages everything in his service, one is accepted as Jivan Mukta, a liberated soul, even during his lifetime within the material world. So that should be our takeaway today. We should try to become Jivan Mukta, a liberated soul, even during one's lifetime within the material world. That should be, and that was the position of Prita Maharaj, liberated even in this lifetime. In Krishna consciousness, the results of one's activities depend on the will of the Supreme Person. Indeed, in all cases, the result is not dependent on one's own personal dexterity, meaning expertise, but is completely dependent on the will of the Supreme. This is the real significance of Phalam Brahmani Sannyasa. A soul dedicated to the service of the Lord should never think of himself as this personal proprietor or the superintendent. A dedicated devotee should prosecute his work according to the rules and regulations described in devotional service. The results of his activities are completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. So the devotee is completely surrendered to Krishna and follows the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness and is not lusty and greedy, but is completely surrendered to the service of the Lord. That is our takeaway today. And therefore, when it says, Maya Dakshina Prakriti Suyate Satcharacharam, Hitananena Konte Jagat Viparivartate, the material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all the moving and unmoving beings. And by its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. We should pay a lot of attention. We should pay attention to this verse. I would give it 9:10. Not even a blade of grass moves without the mercy of the Lord and without the direction of the Lord. That we have to have that faith, that understanding. Therefore, sometimes there are situations that seem to be very bad, but the devotee remains very patient in such situations, knowing that the Lord has some purpose to accomplish. And therefore, to understand what that purpose is, we have to be patient and see what the Lord actually wants. So a devotee is patient in all situations, knowing that Krishna is the supreme proprietor and the supreme controller of everything. Even in the worst situations, we should remain, completely under the direction of the Lord's instructions and not be discouraged by what's happening. So, one time, Prabhupada said, because there were devotees that would leave ISKCON, even in the time of Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada said, well, I am not surprised by those who have left. I am surprised by those who have not left. So that sort of sums up Krishna consciousness. Not everybody is going to become Krishna conscious, but someone who does tolerate all situations and remains very faithful to Prabhupada in Krishna consciousness, that person is an exceptional devotee and should be given all respect. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram,
Ram
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 Ram,
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, no questions, no comments. And our takeaway is a dedicated devotee should prosecute his work according to the rules and regulations described in devotional service. The results of his activities are completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. That is our takeaway today. In other words, the devotee is going to accept whatever Krishna wants. Sometimes there'll be success, sometimes there might not be success, but the devotee never gives up acting according to the rules and regulations of devotional service and being completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. Okay, my dear devotees, thank you very much. Please meditate on this statement. A dedicated devotee should prosecute his work according to the rules and regulations described in the devotional service. The results of his activities are completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. Thank you very much. Meditate on the Canto 4, Chapter 22, and the last couple sentences of the purport. A dedicated devotee should prosecute his work according to the rules and regulations described in devotional service. The results of his activities are completely dependent on the supreme will of the Lord. So we should accept whatever happens as long as we are following the rules and regulations described in devotional service. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And don't worry about the war that's taking place now. Yeah, I mean, let's say you're living in Delhi right now. And Delhi's it's a huge population, living in Delhi. What if there's an atomic bomb that falls on Delhi? It would be a disaster, right? So let's see what's going to happen. Okay, my dear devotees, chant Hare Krishna, be happy, and pray for the protection of all devotees engaged in devotional service. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.